How can a pilot move from total frustration to an ovation in the same weekend? What did Hamilton do in Imola so that Tifosi went from disappointment to hope? Today I am going to tell you the story of redemption of 7-time champion in his first big appointment as a Ferrarist at home. Emilia Romagna 2025 was marked with red on the calendar of any Ferrari fan. Imola, that layout of legendary curves, of indelible memories and overflowing passion, was presented as the first great public examination of Lewis Hamilton as a Scuderia pilot before her new fan. Everything was given to be a party, a historic day, a rebirth. But what was lived on Saturday was the opposite. A collapse that left deep scars both in the team and in the image of the 7-time world champion. The atmosphere was electric since Friday. Hamilton had demonstrated flashes in a good way during free training. The SF-25, although still in the process of development, seemed to have a solid base, and the small improvements introduced in the back of the car gave signs that the team was in the right direction. The comments inside the garage were positive. The analyses showed that the car had potential for Q3. And with that in mind, Ferrari launched himself to the classification with a silent, but palpable expectation. However, the Imola track does not forgive mistakes or lack of technical synchrony. The classification was a blow of reality that undressed Ferrari's fragilities in borderline situations. The two cars were left out in Q2, something unacceptable for a team that is presumed to be a contestant. In the case of Hamilton, the problem was especially disconcerting. He had reported favorable sensations with the car throughout the weekend, even highlighting the improvement in the entry of fast curves thanks to the work in the rear brakes and the new design of the beam wing. But when the crucial time came, the tires simply did not offer the necessary grip. There was no excessive degradation or pilot errors. It was something more intangible, as if the car had changed behavior at the least timely moment. Hamilton's face when getting out of the car said everything. It wasn't just frustration for a bad result. It was a deep, almost existential disappointment, having not been able to respond to the call of thousands of tifosi who filled the stands with red flags, with welcome banners, with songs that bore their name. The promise of redemption that seemed to embody his arrival to Ferrari collapsed in a matter of minutes. He declared to feel devastated, and that word was not a rhetorical exaggeration. In his body language, in his lost gaze, the emotional burden of not being up to a moment that he himself knew he was historical was read. And here is the paradox. It was precisely in that sinking where Sunday's redemption narrative began to be built. Because for a pilot of his caliber, true value is not measured only in victories, but in the ability to redo after a brutal fall. But on that black Imola Saturday, Hamilton was not a world champion. He was simply an exposed, fragile man, facing Ferrari's ghosts and the unbearable weight of the Italian expectation. Sunday in Imola began with a different air. The stands were still full of tifosi, but the enthusiasm felt attenuated, almost content, as if the wound on Saturday still hurt too much. Ferrari had failed in classification, and although hopes were not completely lost, few imagined a significant comeback from the 12th starting position. But what was to come would be a masterclass for strategy, adaptation and execution by Maranello's team and his star pilot, Lewis Hamilton. From the beginning, the key was a risky but calculated choice: hard tires for the first stint. While most of his rivals opted for media, betting on a more aggressive first part, Ferrari decided to extend the Hamilton race horizon. It was not only about enduring more time on the track, but about staying outside the chaos of the middle group during the first laps, avoiding dense traffic in the stops and, above all, capitalizing any neutralization that could change the natural order of the competition. And those opportunities arrived. First, a virtual safety car phase allowed Ferrari to gain relative time on the track. Then, the appearance of the safety car reel finished placing the race in the hands of the strategists. Hamilton, who had maintained a constant rhythm without forcing the tire, was called to boxes at the precise moment, dating an ideal position to attack. This is where the difference between an experienced pilot and one reagent becomes more noticeable. Hamilton not only executed the strategy, optimized it with each return, taking care of the gums without wasting time, managing distances with millimeter precision. Radio communication between Hamilton and his engineer Riccardo Adami was impeccable. There were no doubts, there were no hesitations. Each message was clear, direct and, above all, based on a successful reading of career evolution. The coordination was such that even the most skeptical analysts praised Ferrari's decision-making, highlighting that for the first time the Italian team not only reacted, but also anticipated. This synergy between pilot and engineer was what allowed Hamilton to climb positions constantly, without spectacular maneuvers on the track. There were no dramatic advances, but surgical movements at key moments. One by one, the rivals were falling or being surpassed by the simple fact of not having answers to the consistent rhythm of the SF-25 in the hands of Hamilton. The choice to lengthen the first stint paid dividends. The British found himself in points positions before the middle of the race, and as others dealt with loss of rhythm or traffic, he continued advancing. When he finally crossed the finish line in fourth position, many could not explain how he had gone so far from so back. But those who understood the race knew that it was a watchmaking work, precise execution from the first meter to the last. Beyond the result, which really redeemed Ferrari, was not the final position, but the way it was achieved. The Scuderia, so many times criticized by tactical errors, showed that it can operate at the highest strategic level when it trusts its processes. And Hamilton, on the other hand, showed that he still has that unique ability to transform an adverse context in an opportunity to reaffirm his greatness. It was a silent, but monumental performance. A message not only for Tifosi but for the entire grille. Ferrari, when aligning with logic and tactical coldness, can be lethal. And Hamilton, when he finds that balance between aggressiveness and control, remains one of the greatest assets that any team can have. This fourth place may seem a discrete result on paper, but for Hamilton and Ferrari it represents an emotional, technical, and strategic turning point. For Lewis, it was not simply a comeback, it was a validation. After a start of the season marked by adjustments, internal doubts and adaptation to a completely new structure, this race was the first visible testimony that the effort invested is paying fruit. It was not about taking advantage of alien accidents or errors, but of building an intelligent career from the bottom and executing it with mastery. Hamilton, for the first time since his departure from Mercedes, felt that the car and the team responded in the same tune. Ferrari, meanwhile, achieved something that had rarely achieved in recent years: a career plan executed with millimeter precision. The SF-25, although it still presents weaknesses in traction and stability in long curves, evidenced improvements in the management of tires and in the coherence of the career rhythm. This is no accident. It is the reflection of the work of a technical group that, led by Loic Serra, has opted for an evolution divided into phases, trying to avoid the common error of implementing large aerodynamic packages without having solved basic structural problems. The scene in Imola is a clear symptom of that strategy. Less spectacular in updates, more efficiency and control of key variables. The result not only revived the relationship between Hamilton and Ferrari, but also repositioned the British within the Maranello ecosystem. His figure went from being low scrutiny after bad classification to become a reference for how to operate with cold blood and long-term vision. Mutual respect within the team was strengthened. The connection with Riccardo Adami, his career engineer, is one of the pillars that begins to consolidate with each race. In this sport, internal trust is not imposed, it is built. And Imola was a giant step in that direction. In addition, the symbolic burden of having achieved this on Italian soil cannot be underestimated. Ferrari is not any team. His relationship with the press, with the fans and with history is different from that of any other team. The Tifosi not only ask for results, they demand passion, delivery, and honor. And what Hamilton offered in this race was precisely that. It was not just a fourth place. It was a demonstration of character, of tempering in the face of pressure, and commitment to the legacy that it now represents. That emotional connection with the Italian public, wounded on Saturday, began to heal on Sunday. And in Ferrari, such gestures weigh as much as the points. Finally, this performance reconfigures the mental map of the season. Ferrari, which until now seemed to be shipwrecked in a sea of inconsistencies, showed that it has reaction capacity. And with Hamilton in front, he has a leader who can mark the course even in moments of uncertainty. This race was a general essay of what could come later in the year. If they manage to maintain this level of execution and consolidate the improvements planned for Barcelona, they could be able to compete with McLaren and Mercedes more frequently. The battle is not yet won, but the war for Ferrari's rebirth has seriously begun. And Hamilton has made it clear that he is not here to complete a cycle. He is here to make history. Hamilton's performance in Imola has left a much deeper footprint than the simple statistic of a fourth place. What happened in Emilia Romagna's Grand Prix was a silent, but forceful statement. Lewis Hamilton has not come to Ferrari to retire dignity, he has come to write a new chapter in his legacy. And this result is just the first page. The way in which he faced adversity, transforming a catastrophic classification into a brilliant tactical career, is exactly the type of history that defines the great champions. What we saw in Imola was the competitive rebirth of a pilot that many were already beginning to be overcome. And he did it by wearing red in Ferrari territory, under the demanding look of a hobby that does not forgive mistakes, but that does not forget the acts of greatness. The question is now evident. Can you maintain this level? Is this result the beginning of an ascending line or simply a parenthesis within a still unstable season? The calendar is full of circuits that will test the strength of this incipient synergy between Hamilton and Ferrari. It should be observed if the team can sustain this tactical execution and if the SF-25 will continue to evolve as those technical managers promise. It will also be crucial to see how Charles Leclerc responds, which until now has been the face of the Ferrari project, but that in this race was eclipsed by the performance of his new partner. And of course there is the emotional narrative. What connects the most with fans is not only telemetry or strategy but human drama. The fall of Saturday, the rebirth of Sunday, the reaction of the team, the applause of the tifosi at the end. All these elements build a story that transcends competition. Imola reminded us that Formula One is not only a sport of figures, but a scenario where the pressure, redemption and willingness to remain relevant when many no longer expect anything about you. Therefore now is your turn. I want you to tell me, do you think this race marks a before and after for Hamilton and Ferrari? Or was it simply an isolated case where the strategy shone more than the car or the pilot? What do you think can happen on the next dates of the championship? I want to read your answers in the comments, discuss with you and with the whole community. If you like this analysis and want us to deepen even more in Ferrari's upcoming strategies, its technical improvements or the impact that Hamilton is generating internally, sign to the channel and activates notifications. A key part of the championship is coming, and here we will continue every step with magnifying glass so that you do not miss anything.